Early humans were often injured in the brain, yet they commonly survived long enough for the injuries to heal. This is the research conclusion that examined 2,300 and 50,000-year-old skulls from a cave in Spain. The investigation also revealed that recovery was not guaranteed. Several of the people in the cave perished from strong blows to the head. Welcome to the Pit of Bones. Around 350,000 years ago, the bones of at least 29 individuals were discovered at the bottom of a 13-meter-deep tunnel deep inside a cave network in what is now northern Spain. Paleoanthropologists have discovered hundreds of shattered bits of bone that add up to the incomplete skeletons of at least 29 individuals of Homo heidelbergensis, a hominin species that may have been a shared ancestor of our species and Neanderthals. We are going to talk about this 1-million-year-old human skull buried in a secret that will blow your mind. Welcome to our YouTube channel History Says, and don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. The Cima de los Huesos pit is made up of people of all ages and genders. Paleoanthropologists are still disputing whether the hole was a burial site or just a spot where floods swept bones in. Paleoanthropologists have reconstructed the fragmentary skulls of at least 20 long-dead hominins, and the majority of them seem to have received and survived bone-breaking blows to the head. 17 of the 20 Cima de los Huesos skulls exhibited symptoms of a form of damage known as a depressed skull fracture. In a pit full of bones, evidence of damage isn't surprising. They must have perished in some way. The great majority of the skull fractures in this instance, however, were ancient wounds that had healed years before the patients died. When a blunt object, such as a rock or a baseball bat, strikes the human skull, it may push a tiny chunk of bone inside if the power of the impact is concentrated in a small location. In the worst-case scenario, the shattered bone plate might impose pressure on the brain, or the fracture can expose the brain to pathogens from outside. However, if none of these things occur, depressed skull fractures normally heal on their own. That is precisely what occurred to the majority of the early people who ended up at Cima de los Huesos. When archaeologist Noemi Sala of Spain's National Center for Research on Human Evolution and her colleagues examined the skull pieces under a microscope and with a CT scanner, they discovered that 17 of the 20 partial skulls had at least one tiny round depression on their surface. The dents were tiny and shallow, measuring less than 2 centimeters in width. As the fractures healed, bone rebuilt itself around the fracture edges, smoothing down the rough edges of shattered bone. To put it another way, these early humans definitely survived minor head traumas. A handful of the skulls had at least 10 healed fractures, suggesting that their previous residents were either aggressive or clumsy, or possibly both. Millions of years' worth of head trauma. What happened in Pleistocene Spain to cause so many broken noggins in early humans? According to Sala and her co-workers, nothing was occurring that wasn't happening elsewhere. In the Paleolithic fossil record, this form of the non-fatal lesion is rather prevalent, they stated. Healed fractures like the ones found at Cima de los Huesos have been discovered on the skulls of early members of our genus, such as Homo erectus, as well as Neanderthals and individuals of our own species. However, the burial pit at Cima de los Huesos is unique in that it allows us to examine a full community of hominins rather than just a few solitary individuals. This implies that paleoanthropologists like Sala and her colleagues will be able to determine how prevalent these injuries were. Small skull fractures were frequent 350,000 years ago and seem to have been a way of life for practically everyone. Even the youngest members of the group at Cima de los Huesos had some fractures that had already healed, suggesting that everyone enjoyed a rough-and-tumble lifestyle from a young age. Male and female skeletons at Cima de los Huesos showed almost comparable numbers of repaired fractures, indicating that men and women were exposed to the same risks with roughly equal frequency. It's difficult to determine what those dangers were, but we can make some educated guesses. Conflicts with other early people, falls onto harsh rocks, or close encounters with animals. The majority of the repaired fractures were in susceptible regions of the skull, where only the scalp, not muscle, covered the bone. Otherwise, the injuries were strewn over the heads with no discernible pattern to indicate what had transpired. Anthropologists often identify fight injuries based on their placement. For example, if you're carrying a club in your right hand and swinging it at another person, your blow would most likely hit your left side. However, if you are just tossing pebbles at the other person, the hits may seem more random. This concludes today's video. Thanks for watching, and if you like the video, give us big thumbs and subscribe to the channel.